before we start, we understand some of the terminologies because these lesions manifest in the form of ulcers, macules, vesicles, bullae. So, what are ulcers? This is a break in the continuity of the covering epithelium, which is because of the molecular death of the surface epithelium, or maybe because of its traumatic removal. What is a macule? A macule is a well circumscribed, flat, discolored area which is 0.5 centimeter in diameter. What is a vesicle? A vesicle is a clear fluid filled eruption. It's a clear fluid filled eruption on the surface of mucosa or epithelium, and the size of which is up to 0.5 centimeter. Whereas a bullous lesion is larger than 0.5 centimeters. A nodule is a localized raised lesion which is greater than 0.5 centimeter, and the one which is smaller than 0.5, a smaller one, flat raised lesion, is a papule. A plaque is an elevated plateau-like area that measures greater than 0.5. It is greater than 0.5 centimeters in diameter. So with the terminologies, let us go to the classification of the mucocutaneous diseases. It includes a vast number of lesions. Basically, they can be characterized as genodermatosis, that is those which are genetically transmitted, and non-genodermatosis. The non-genodermatitis, according to the etiology, again can be infectious and non-infections. We know the various infections, the viral infections, bacterial infections, which can have both cutaneous as well as oral manifestation. Then there are non-infectious diseases which could be immunological or non-immunological. The immunological, if they manifest in the form of vesicles and bullae, they are vesicular, or otherwise they are non-vesicular. And the non-immunological have a degenerative and the pigmentation disorders. So let us begin with the vesiculobullous diseases. In the vesiculobullous diseases, they are classified as of viral etiology, which includes some of the viral infections, the autoimmune etiology, which includes the pemphigus and pemphigoids, and the non-specific ones. The pemphigus means blister. It is an autoimmune intraepithelial blistering disease affecting the skin and mucous membranes, and it is mediated by circulating autoantibodies directed against the keratinocyte cell surface, and here it is the desmosomes. The types of pemphigus are pemphigus vulgaris, which is the commonest type, then is foliaceous, wedge dance, and erythematosus. The key feature here, understanding the pathogenesis of pemphigus, is there are autoantibodies formed against the desmosome, and to be more specific, against the desmoglein 3 of the desmosomes. So what are desmosomes? They form the intercellular junctions between the epithelial cells. The cells are attached with each other by desmosomes, whereas they are attached to the basement membrane by way of hemidesmosomes. Now, when this antigen-antibody reaction takes place at the desmosomes, antigen-antibody binding takes place, and this leads to destruction of the desmosomes, and because of the destruction of desmosomes and collection of the edema fluid, the cells, they get separated from each other as seen here, and this is termed as acantholysis. And the edema fluid which gathers here is called as prevesicular edema. So gradually as it increases, there is collection of more and more fluid, and it forms an intraepithelial vesicle. And in this intraepithelial vesicle are seen the acantholytic cells floating here, which form the basis of Zang cells, which we see in the pemphigus. Now, additional feature is the basal cell layer remains attached to the basement membrane zone. Now, why this happens? Because the basal cell layer is connected to the basement membrane by way of desmosomes. So that is the reason we get a characteristic histopathological picture in pemphigus, that is suprabasilar split. So this is prevesicular edema. The cells have lost the cohesion, and these are the acantholytic cells. Gradually the edema fluid collects and it forms an intraepithelial vesicle which has a thin roof here as seen here, and the basal cell remains attached to the underlying tissues, as we can see at a higher magnification. we can see with the higher magnification here, and these are the acantholytic Zhang cells which are seen in a Zhang smear. The pemphigus vulgaris, which is the most common type, involves oral mucosa very often, and it is characterized by formation of intraepithelial vesicles and bullae. Since it is intraepithelial with thin roof, they soon rupture and form eroded areas, which may get secondarily infected. And the two signs which are positive here are Nikolsky's sign. We have seen why it is positive. It is the peeling of epithelium due to oblique pressure, rubbing or rubbing of the unaffected skin or mucosa. Another sign is Asbo-Henson sign. That is, when a lateral pressure is applied on the edge of a blister, it may spread laterally in the unaffected skin. Now these are the lesions, these are the vesicles which are smaller in size, and these are the bullae. They all rupture very soon, leaving the eroded areas. This is the histopathology of pemphigus, where we can see a suprabasilar split and the intraepithelial vesicle which is seen here. The Zhang test is positive, it shows the Zhang cells or acantholytic cells. Diagnosis is confirmed by immunofluorescence. Immunofluorescence binds the site of antigen-antibody reaction, and hence it is at the cell surfaces, and what we get is a fishnet appearance of immunofluorescence. The treatment is corticosteroids, antibiotics, and supportive therapy. Now, there are variants of pemphigus vegetans, foliaceous, and erythematosus, paraneoplastic pemphigus, and familial benign pemphigus, also called as Hailey-Hailey disease. Now, what is a Zhang test, which we talk about? It's a simple diagnostic cytological method for mucocutaneous lesions or infections. A material is scraped from the base of a freshly ruptured blister. It is smeared on a glass slide and stained with PAP stain, Giemsa stain, or toluidine blue. It shows the various types of cells. In pemphigus vulgaris, it shows the acantholytic cells. In herpes, it shows the cells, virally infected cells, which are undergoing ballooning degeneration. This is what we see in herpes simplex and varicella zoster virus. And this is in pemphigus, acantholytic cells are seen. Now what is this? There are some lesions called as pemphigoid, that is similar to pemphigus. So how do they differ from pemphigus and how they resemble pemphigus? They resemble because they produce the blisters. But blister in pemphigus, they are intraepithelial because they involve the intercellular bridges of the epithelium. Whereas the vesicles of bullae in pemphigoids are because of the antigen-antibody reaction or autoantibodies which are formed against the basement membrane zone. And when the pemphigoid occurs, these blisters are subepithelial in nature. As we have seen, there will be a binding of antibodies here. So there will be a defect and destruction here. So this part will get separated from the underlying connective tissue, and it will lead to a subepithelial blistering. So in the pemphigoids, we have subepithelial blistering. Then what is benign mucous membrane pemphigoid? It, as the name suggests, it involves the mucous membranes and rarely skin, whereas bullous pemphigoid involves more often skin and less of the mucous membrane. And deeper if you go, antibodies formed against the type 7 collagen, that is what is seen in epidermolysis bullosa. Now this is bullous pemphigoid. It's a chronic autoimmune disease, subepidermal blistering disease, where autoantibodies are formed against the bullous pemphigoid antigen 1 and antigen 2, which are present at the basement membrane zone. So this is vulgaris and pemphigoid. These are some of the differences. Where histopathology, there is a suprabasilar split in pemphigus, and whereas in pemphigoid, the split is subepithelial. And in pemphigus, immunofluorescence gives a fishnet appearance, whereas in pemphigoid, we get a linear zone at the basement membrane. The mucous membrane pemphigoid, which is also known as cicatricial pemphigoid, because the lesions seal with cicatrix or scar formation, and which leads to the complication when it occurs in the ocular mucosa or in the pharyngeal mucosa where it leads to stricture formation. In epidermolysis bullosa, it is a heterogeneous group of inherited blistering mucocutaneous disorders where there is a defect in the attachment mechanism of cells or to the underlying tissues, or there may be genes encoding for the keratin may be defective, and so accordingly there are different types. It is the simplex type which has keratin 5 and 14 encoding gene defect, and so it leads to aberrant or abnormal keratinization. The second type is junctional epidermolysis bullosa, wherein the genes encoding for laminin 5 and 6 are defective, and so what we get is blistering at the junctional area. And deeper if you go, it is dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa, where the type 7 collagen is affected here, that is anchoring fibrils are affected. So the defect is little deeper. It is characterized by development of the bullous lesions at the site of trauma as seen here, and in the oral cavity it may blister and heal with scarring producing the microsomia. Now erythema multiforme, it's another disease wherein it's an acute self-limiting inflammatory blistering mucocutaneous condition. It is a spectrum of diseases. The minor form is erythema multiforme, that is minor erythema multiforme minor, which is the mildest form of the disease, and the more severe form of the disease is Stevens-Johnson syndrome or toxic epidermonecrolysis. Now, what is the etiology for this? It is the immunological derangement which is triggered by either infection or exposure to the drugs. So erythema multiforme minor, this is the most common form. It is self-limiting recurring mucocutaneous reaction, and it is characterized by presence of target lesions. By presence of target lesions, what are these target lesions? These are also called as bullseye lesion. They have a central zone of either a macule, papule, or a vesicle around which there are concentric rings of erythema. There are concentric rings of erythema as seen here. And why it is called as multiforme? Because variations in the appearance of these lesions can occur in different forms, and that is why it is erythema multiforme. Sometimes it may be limited to oral mucosa only. The lesions are either macules, vesicles, bullae or ulcer, and they have a hemorrhagic tendency because of the erythematous lesions which are seen here. And they are more commonly seen on the anterior part of the oral cavity, that is the lips, and they soon dry up and form the bloody crustaceans on the lip. The more severe form is multiforme major. Here, along with the skin, there is involvement of the two mucosal side. Again, it is also triggered by the drugs. It has two forms on the severity, depending on severity. One is Stevens-Johnson syndrome and toxic epidermal lysis. Now, in Stevens-Johnson syndrome, it is because of exposure to drugs. It involves, along with the mucosal and skin lesion, there is ocular and genital lesions which are also seen. The lesions may not be typical targets, they are atypical flat targets or macules. The lesions may heal with scarring. The ocular lesions may also show scarring, which is symblepharon development. And in addition, there is genital involvement. The severest form is toxic epidermal necrolysis. This is also triggered by the drug exposure, and there is drug diffuse sloughing of the skin or the mucosal surfaces. Now, histopathologically, if you see, it is characterized by intraepithelial vesiculation. There is destruction of the basal cell layer which leads to the epithelial loss. The treatment is corticosteroids, antibiotics and antifungal agents. Psoriasis is a chronic inflammatory dermatologic disease which rarely has the oral manifestations. The skin lesions are in the form of papules which are covered by delicate silver scales which resemble the thin layer of mica. And when these are pulled out, they leave bleeding points which is called as Auspitz sign. Intraorally, white plaques with erythematous base are seen, and there are multiple papules which may be ulcerated. Histologically, the characteristic appearance is that the epithelium shows parakeratosis, elongated club-shaped rete and the presence of Monroe's abscess, which are the intraepithelial abscesses. Keratosis follicularis is a Darius disease which is characterized by aberrant epidermal keratinization, and so intraorally it is seen as minute papules with a cobblestone appearance as seen here. Histologically, it has typical hyperpara-aberrant keratinization, and there are the cells called as cork rods and cork grains. The grains are seen in the granular cell layer, whereas the grains are seen in the hyperkeratotic layer, and the rods are seen in the granular cell layer of the epithelium. And the treatment, since it is a keratinization defect, the oral retinoids may be of help. Lupus erythematosus is a disease of autoimmune origin where the antibodies are formed against the own cells, that is anti-nuclear antibodies may be present. It occurs in two forms. The severe form or more generalized form is systemic lupus erythematosus, and other one is discoid lupus erythematosus. The systemic one has it is with the development of erythematous patches. When these patches develop on the face or malar region due to exposure to sunlight, and when it extends across the nasal bridge, it may cause a butterfly rash or a malar rash. It is associated with other generalized involvements, that is rheumatoid arthritis, kidney and heart disease. The less severe form is discoid lupus erythematosus, and it is said to have a potential for malignant transformation. The skin lesions of discoid erythematosus, if they are pulled out forcefully, they have extensions that is called as carpet tack extensions. The oral lesions, they are erythematous lesions. These are erythematous lesions with white keratotic borders. The lesion heal towards the center and they extend towards the periphery. Histologically, it resembles with the lichen planus histopathology, but here you can see a widespread inflammatory infiltrate in the connective tissue, and the inflammatory infiltrate is more localized in a perivascular location. The lab findings include Early cell phenomena, and diagnosis is with the help of anti-nuclear antibodies present. Scleroderma, as the name says, it is deposition of excess amount of fibrosis. There are various disturbances which are suggested which can lead to fibrosis, but finally what you get is increased collagen deposition in the tissues. It has got variants, a circumscribed or localized form and a systemic sclerosis, which also includes the Crest syndrome. So because of excessive deposition of collagen beneath the skin in the subcutaneous tissue, the skin gets hardened, it gets fixed, it cannot wrinkle, and it gets a typical mask face appearance. Because of fibrosis, there are claw fingers. The oral manifestations are all because of the excessive fibrosis. Tongue becomes stiff, same way soft palate and larynx are also involved. Gingival tissue is pale and usually firm. The salivary glands also show Sjogren's disease-like symptoms. The characteristic radiographic feature is widening of the periodontal ligament space. There is widening of the periodontal ligament space, and histopathologically there is excessive collagen deposition with hyalinization, and the overlying surface epithelium, it shows atrophy. Hereditary ectodermal dysplasia, it is characterized by congenital defects of one or more ectodermal structures. So all the ectodermal structures are affected. It is the skin appendages, glandular tissue, salivary glands, lacrimal glands, and it also affects the oral ectoderm, and hence development of tooth is also affected. It is X-linked recessive Mendelian in nature. The facial appearance is very typical. It is with depressed nasal bridge, frontal bossing, and protuberant lips. The skin is smooth, dry because of the absence of sweat glands. There is a heat intolerance, or there may be hyperpyrexia. The hair follicles are involved, so there is thin and sparse hair. The lacrimal glands gives rise to xerophthalmia, and involvement of salivary glands gives rise to a dry mouth. Because the oral ectoderm is also involved, there is anodontia, oligodontia, malformed teeth. And as the teeth show anodontia, there is reduced vertical, the alveolar processes remain underdeveloped because they need the functional stimuli from the teeth. So they lack this, so there is reduced vertical dimensions, and that is the reason the lips appear to be protruding.